most people think about the Alien franchise, the first thing that comes to mind is Xenomorph this, facehugger that, and don't get us wrong, these bugs are terrifying. But we've always thought the real danger isn't the monsters, it's the people in suits profiting from the whole mess. Most famously, the Weylands, and eventually the Vickers, are the ones quietly pulling humanity's strings while everyone else is busy not getting their chest ripped open. That's why we wanted to dig into the Weyland-Vickers family tree, and let me tell you, it's not straightforward. You see, it's not a clean little chart you could slap on the wall. There's a film canon we can count on, semi-canon viral marketing stuff that blurs the line, and expanded lore that feels half official, half speculative. Put it all together, and we don't get a neat little family photo, but a dynasty. So, in this marvelous video, we're laying it all out. Who is 100% confirmed on screen, who comes from the murkier corners of the lore, and how their influence ripples across the alien universe. By the end, you'll see why, in this franchise, it's not always the xenomorphs we should worry about, the people signing the checks. Before we get into this explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. Charles Bishop Weylan, the Pioneer. Canon. AVP Continuity. Charles Bishop Weyland is a really interesting piece of the Alien vs. Predator puzzle, because he kinda sits at the crossroads between fan-favorite lore and alternate canon that doesn't quite line up with Prometheus. In the AVP timeline, he's the guy who actually founded Weyland Industries in the early 21st century. That's a huge deal, because in this version of events, there's no Peter Weyland yet. Charles is the original big brain who kickstarted the mega corporation we all know later as part of Weyland-Yutani. His first and only major on-screen appearance comes in 2004's Alien vs. Predator. He's played by Lance Henriksen, which was a cool wink to fans since Henriksen had already played Bishop, the android in Aliens, as well as Michael Bishop in Alien 3. This was the filmmaker's way of tying things together. Charles Bishop Weyland is human, but his likeness supposedly inspires the Bishop synthetic model we see later in the timeline. So, even if the continuities don't fully mesh, there's a neat little ancestor feel to his role. In the film, Weyland is already dying from cancer but refuses to go out quietly. He kept the illness under wraps, not wanting his status as the face of Weyland Industries to take a hit. He funds and personally leads a 2004 Antarctic expedition after one of his satellites picks up a weird heat bloom beneath the ice. That heat source ends up being the buried Predator Pyramid, a hunting ground built centuries ago where xenomorphs were bred as prey for young predators. Weyland insists on going down there himself with a desperation to cement his legacy before the disease takes him, but it doesn't work out well. The expedition goes south fast when the team uncovers Predator plasma casters inside a sarcophagus. Weyland ordered them to seize them despite protests from the scientists. That triggered the pyramid's deadly shifting walls, which led to facehuggers breaking loose. Soon, people start getting picked off by aliens and predators alike, and Weyland dies in the chaos after trying to hold off a predator with a makeshift flamethrower. Not the most successful field trip, but his death is a defining moment that shows him as a stubborn, ambitious, and unwilling to quit leader, even when the odds are impossible. Now, the important thing here is that the AVP timeline splits from what Ridley Scott later did in Prometheus. In Prometheus, and subsequently Alien Covenant, Weyland Industries is founded by Peter Weyland, not Charles. Peter is portrayed as a visionary tech mogul, a man obsessed with creation and immortality. In the AVP continuity, Charles fills that role instead, being the original pioneer who built the company and put it on the map. The timelines don't overlap. AVP sits in its own corner of canon, but it's clear that Charles Bishop Weyland in AVP probably helped inspire the creation of Peter Weyland in Prometheus. Both men are powerful industrialists who kick off the events that spiral into humanity's entanglement with the xenomorphs. The main difference is that Charles is more of an explorer with a tragic end, while Peter is a titan of industry with a god complex. So, while Charles Bishop Weyland doesn't get referenced outside of the AVP films, he's a pretty key figure in that continuity. He gives the Weyland name its first roots, ties into the Bishop androids, and humanity's first brush with both aliens and predators in that version of history. If you treat AVP as its own canon, then Charles is the original Weyland pioneer who went out chasing legacy and ended up buried in ice, remembered more for his ambition than his success.
Hello, friends. My name is Peter Weyland.
Number 2. Peter Weyland, the visionary founder. Canon, Prometheus. Peter Weyland is the guy who thought money, brains, and sheer ego could outmatch death itself. Dude basically rewrote what it meant to be a tech mogul in the alien universe. In canon, he's the one who officially founded the Weyland Corporation in 2012, and from the start he was less of a build a company make money kind of businessman and more of the reach for godhood kind of visionary. When Ridley Scott gave us Prometheus in 2012, Guy Pearce brought him to life as this larger-than-life industrialist with a god complex. He wasn't content with building machines or creating synthetic life. Nope, he wanted to meet the very beings who made humanity in the first place. Weyland had this obsession with the engineers, the mysterious race hinted to be humanity's creators. While most billionaires were investing in space mining and terraforming colonies for profit, Peter was looking for answers to the biggest questions. Who made us? Why are we here? And could he somehow cheat death by finding them? That hunger for more is what pushed him to fund the Prometheus mission in 2093. Not only did his company aid the mission, but he himself boarded the ship, despite being an old man on his last legs, because he wasn't about to let anyone else steal the moment of truth from him. At the time of the mission, at 103 years old, his body was failing, but his ego was as sharp as ever. He secretly tagged along in stasis with only a few key crew members aware, planning to confront the engineers directly. He figured if they created humanity, they might also hold the key to extending his life, maybe even granting immortality, and in typical Weyland fashion, he brought David, his synthetic son, as both servant and translator. David wasn't his only creation. He was Weyland's way of flexing his own ability to play God, a man who makes artificial life demanding answers from the real gods. When Prometheus landed on LV-223 and things went awry, Weyland finally came face to face with an engineer, and it didn't go as well as he expected. Instead of granting him eternal life or cosmic wisdom, the engineer woke up and promptly tore David's head clean off, using it as a blunt weapon to beat Weyland to death into the ground in front of his crew. So, after decades of dreaming of meeting mankind's creators, Peter Weyland's big finale was dying on an alien moon at the hands of one of the very beings he worshipped. What makes him such a fascinating character is the sheer audacity of it all. He wasn't content with wealth, power, or fame. He already had those. He wanted to step beyond human limits, shake hands with gods, and demand more time on the clock. In that sense, his legacy is as much about hubris as it is about vision, and even though he died in 2093, his influence is all over the chaos that follows in the alien universe. His company lives on, his androids, like David, push his ideals in terrifying directions, and his obsession with creation and immortality sets the tone for everything that comes after. 3. Meredith-Vickers, the corporate heiress. Canon, Prometheus. Meredith-Vickers is one of those characters in Prometheus who walks on screen and immediately gives the vibe of someone who would rather be anywhere else than babysitting a bunch of scientists on a suicide mission. Played by Charlize Theron, she wasn't some paper pusher in a corporate tower. She was the high-ranking Weyland Corporation exec in charge of keeping the Prometheus crew in line, making sure the mission didn't spin off budget or off script, juggling the roles of the mission director, and the only one in the room who actually smelled the disaster coming. What most of the crew didn't know at first, though, was that she was also Peter Weyland's daughter. Vickers grew up in the shadow of Peter Weyland, and the relationship was toxic and cold. He poured his affection into his synthetic son, David, while Meredith, his actual flesh and blood, got the scraps. That would make any child resentful, and it did. You can feel her bitterness in the way she talks and treats David with contempt, like she knows deep down that her father replaced her with a machine. She was a Weyland by name and rank, but in Peter's mind, David was the heir to his dreams. That stings, and it explains why she was all business, no warmth. By the time Peter funded Shaw and Holloway's expedition in 2089, his health was tanking, and his company was in shambles. That left Vickers cleaning up the mess as acting CEO, basically carrying the weight of Weyland Corp, while her father was dreaming about aliens giving him eternal life. So, you see, she never really had her daddy's attention. When Weyland offered her a spot on the expedition, even though she wanted no part of his obsession, she went anyways. While Shaw and Holloway were chasing the big existential questions, Vickers was the brick wall reminding them that their bosses back on Earth don't care about philosophy, they care about returns. What nobody else knew was that her father had snuck onto the Prometheus in secret, locked in hypersleep, with only a handful of people aware, and Vickers was one of them. But for all her control and corporate power, her fate comes quickly and cruelly. When the awakened engineer wiped out Weyland and most of the others, Vickers decided she was done. Her plan was to cut losses, fly back to Earth, and let the mess bury itself. When the engineer decides to take his ship and wipe out Earth, the Prometheus crew tries to stop him by ramming their own vessel into his. But Vickers wasn't about to die for anyone's cause. She manages to eject and escape in her own pod, but she doesn't get far. The engineer's massive ship slammed into the ground and pinned her flat, ending her story in the most crushing way possible, right there on LV-223. Vickers works as a tragic counterpoint to her father. Peter was obsessed with playing God and chasing eternal life. Meredith, meanwhile, just wanted his recognition, maybe a sliver of human connection. For all her money, influence, and control, she couldn't outrun the weight of her father's obsession, literally. Number 4. Jacob Vickers, the Forgotten Son. Semi-canon, viral marketing. Jacob Vickers is one of those odd little corners of Prometheus lore that you can only find if you go digging through viral marketing and promotional material from back when the film came out. He doesn't show up in the movie, nobody mentions him, and if you only stuck to what played out on screen, you'd never even know he existed. But on the official Weyland Industries site that Ridley Scott's team put together to hype up the film, Jacob was revealed as Meredith's great-grandson. The fact that Jacob never made it to the big screen is what makes him interesting. His absence tells you a lot about where the filmmakers wanted the viewer's attention. Prometheus was about Peter Weyland, his god complex, Meredith's icy resentment, and David's bizarre evolution. Tossing Jacob into that craziness would have diluted the drama. Still, Jacob's presence in the marketing lore fleshes out the idea that the Weyland dynasty wasn't a one-man show plus an android. Whether you call him canon or not depends on how hardcore you want to be about the alien timeline, but in the strictest sense, Jacob is semi-canon, real in the promotional world building, but invisible in the films. 5. David 8, the Surrogate Son, canon. Prometheus/Alien Covenant. David 8 is where the Weyland family tree gets really strange, because he's not family by blood, but in Peter Weyland's mind, he's the son he always wanted. Built as one of the most advanced synthetics ever made, David was an android, and a legacy Peter could sculpt by hand. In Peter's mind, David was the ideal child, free of weakness and built to serve. This meant no messy inheritance, no human flaws, because David was supposed to be perfect, and that's where the whole mess begins. Prometheus introduces him as Peter Weyland's personal assistant, right-hand man, the perfect butler, translator, pilot, and even caretaker. But in private, his surrogate was a child to him. Peter treated David as more than a machine. To him, David was proof that mankind could play God. He raised him not like an employee, but like a child, one who never complained, never aged, and always did what he was told. That's why Peter drags David along to LV-223 in the year 2093. In Prometheus, David's role goes way beyond that of a corporate lackey. He follows orders, but is also the quiet observer on the ship and studying the crew. He soon starts running experiments behind everyone's back, like infecting Holloway with the black goo, watching how events unfold like some curious kid to see what would happen. By the time Alien Covenant comes out, David has gone completely off the leash. After surviving LV-223, he makes his way to Planet 4. With Peter gone, David embraces the godlike ambitions his creator once had. He studies the engineers, wipes out their entire city with their own bioweapon, and then uses the black goo and begins his experiments to bring the protomorphs into existence. In a way, he was carrying on the Weyland obsession with creation, but he was pushing it further, faster, and without a shred of human morality to hold him back. What makes David such a disturbing part of the Weyland legacy is how neatly he mirrors Peter's ambition. Peter wanted to meet the gods who made humanity. David wanted to replace them. The prodigal son who takes the Weyland vision to its darkest extreme. Both men thought that they could outsmart death and rewrite the rules of life, and both left destruction in their wake. So when you think about the Weyland legacy, David's influence on the Weylands is undeniable. Without a birth certificate or even a part of the bloodline, in the end, David is the one who carries the family obsession further than any of them ever could.
Surge detected.
Mother, retract the energy sails and channel.
6. Walter, the Successor Synthetic, canon. Alien Covenant. Walter was supposed to be an upgrade, the polished, dependable successor to David. After the Prometheus expedition went dark in 2094, while Weyland himself was long gone, his legacy was still alive through the synthetics his company created. Built by the newly formed Weyland-Yutani, on the surface, Walter looked the same. He was stronger, faster, and more durable than David, but what really set him apart is that all the tricky parts of David's personality had been sanded down. You see, David was curious, creative, and a little too human for comfort. He asked questions, made decisions, and played with the idea of creation itself, and that scared people. Walter was built around the year 2100, and on the other hand, he was developed with great care and no rush to avoid that mess because the higher-ups were terrified of repeating the same mistakes made with David. He was more compliant, more obedient, and less likely to start experimenting with alien goo on unsuspecting crew members. And that's exactly what Weyland-Yutani wanted after seeing how dangerous individuality could be in a synthetic. In Alien Covenant, Walter serves as the caretaker of the colonization ship Covenant. He monitors systems, supports the crew, and takes his role with quiet professionalism. He didn't look for loopholes or play games like David did. He was there to serve solely. Things went off the rails after the Covenant took damage and the crew diverted to investigate a mysterious planet, and Walter ran into David, the very predecessor he had been designed to surpass. Where David inherited Peter's ambition and turned it into something terrifying, Walter embodies the corporation's cold correction. He's proof that Weyland-Yutani learned its lesson. Don't give machines too much free will because they might outgrow you. The irony is that in trying to fix David's flaws, the company may have taken away the very spark that made synthetics special in the first place. Walter can't imagine, which is why when the chips are down, David outmaneuvers him. Walter is stronger and more disciplined, but David's creativity makes him unpredictable. In the end, it's David who survives and takes Walter's place on the Covenant, proving that Peter Weyland's original surrogate son still has the louder voice in the legacy. So, Walter is important not because he outshines David, but because he shows where Weyland's dream went after Peter's death. The company wanted a better synthetic, one that wouldn't turn into an existential threat, and Walter was their answer. He was the corporate vision of perfection, dependable, quiet, and loyal. But in the bigger picture, he was also a reminder that no matter how hard they tried to control their creations, the ghost of David and the ambition of Peter Weyland were always going to haunt them. 7. Michael Bishop Weyland, the Corporate Phantom. Speculative. Alien 3/Expanded Universe. Michael Bishop Weyland, who shows up at the tail end of Alien 3, is one of those characters who makes the Alien timeline messy, but in a way we don't mind. He was the man who designed the Bishop androids and somehow managed to be both brilliant and rotten enough to fit perfectly into Weyland-Yutani's inner circle. Born in New York in 2127, he started out as a synthetic component designer at Hyperdyne Systems. By the time he was climbing the ranks, he was already shaping the future of artificial intelligence. In fact, the Bishop androids he designed were modeled after his own face, which says a lot about how the guy saw himself. By 2179, Bishop had shot up to Director of Special Projects in Weyland-Yutani's Bioweapons Division, and xenomorphs were his obsession. After the outbreak at Hadley's Hope on LV-426, he was sent in to assess the colony and secure specimens for study. Soon after, he turned up on Fiorina 161. His mission was to retrieve the xenomorph loose in the prison colony and, more importantly, bring back Ellen Ripley. She wasn't just valuable because of her history with the creatures, she also carried a queen embryo growing inside her. Bishop knew it, and that made Ripley his prime target. On Fiorina, Bishop claimed he wanted to remove the queen from Ripley safely to save her life and destroy the monster. Classic Weyland-Yutani. Dangle compassion in front of someone when all you really want is the monster growing inside them. But Ripley wasn't fooled, of course. She'd spent too long watching Weyland-Yutani sacrifice lives for profit, and thus chose to end her life by diving into the furnace with the queen embryo still inside her, robbing Bishop and the company of their prize. Bishop's mission had failed, though he didn't leave empty-handed. He captured Hicks. Back on LV-426, Bishop oversaw the experiment to breed more xenomorphs for study. He personally supervised the interrogation of Hicks and squeezed him for every scrap of intel. His team even captured a second queen from the caves beneath the surface, setting up a massive research pipeline. But it all blew up in his face when the USS Sephora and its Marines arrived. The Sephora crew wrecked the facility, killed his pet projects, and forced Bishop to abandon ship. He fled the moon, leaving behind a synthetic double to buy himself time, but by then, Bishop was a mess physically. The head trauma from Fiorina required cybernetic implants to hold his skull together, and the damage left him with brutal migraines and redouts that no doctors could fix. To cope, he relied on heavy painkillers, and eventually he was hooked. But he was still very motivated and sent out mercenaries to hunt hives, scour engineer ruins, and drag back specimens for weaponization. He just couldn't stop chasing the power he thought the creatures represented. Michael Bishop finally died in 2194 during surgery, his body giving out after years of stress, addiction, and the toll of his injuries. But his reputation stuck as he was remembered as a genius, yes, but also as a manipulative, ruthless figure who would smile and promise safety while quietly planning to exploit you. Now, here's where the fun starts. Was Michael Bishop Weyland an actual flesh and blood man? Expanded universe sources suggest different answers. Some argue he could be a descendant of Peter Weyland, carrying on the family name centuries later. Others lean towards him being a clone or even another advanced synthetic designed to look human and manipulate Ripley. The novelizations, comics, and games all toss their theories in the pot, but there has never been a hard confirmation. The casting of Lance Henriksen was an interesting choice and makes the whole thing even more layered. We knew him as Bishop the Android in Aliens first, then as Charles Bishop Weyland in AVP, technically before that, and now as Michael Bishop in Alien 3, after both of them. It ties everything together in a weird meta way, almost like the Weyland family and their creations are destined to wear the same face over and over again. Maybe it's an intentional legacy, maybe not, but it certainly blurs the line between human, clone, and machine.
Private. Glad to meet you. Finally. I've been monitoring your progress.
8. Carl Bishop Weyland, the questionable heir. Speculative. Video game lore. Carl Bishop Weyland was one of those characters who blurred the line between man and machine, and not in a poetic way, literally. He was a synthetic, built to look and act human, but he carried himself like he had the weight of an old legacy on his shoulders. He posed as a direct descendant of Charles Bishop Weyland, the original founder of Weyland Industries, and often liked to imply that he had been alive for centuries. Of course, that wasn't true because his body was new, but his head was filled with the recorded memories and knowledge of the Weylands who came before him. In his mind, it made him a continuity in the flesh and not merely an android. By the time he was running things on BG-386, Carl had climbed high in Weyland-Yutani as a senior director. He was busy orchestrating experiments with xenomorphs, poking around ancient Yautja ruins, and making decisions behind military deals. He was even credited with Weyland-Yutani's push to acquire controlling shares of the Colonial Marines. He had big ambitions, and they all came together on BG-386, where a Yautja pyramid and a living xenomorph queen had been uncovered. His team, led by Dr. Groves, brought the queen into a research facility and bred her offspring for study. One particular chestburster shocked everyone when it emerged through the host's mouth rather than the chest. Groves wanted to terminate it, but Weyland stopped him. He was fascinated and saw the little beast as unique, something that deserved extra study. That creature became known as Specimen 6, and Weyland treated it with a reverence he rarely showed anyone else. His obsession with the xenomorphs wasn't just scientific, it bordered on admiration. He was fascinated by their design, their survival instincts, and the terrifying efficiency of their hive structure. To Carl, while humanity was messy, flawed, and temporary, the xenomorphs were perfection. Of course, his other big obsession was the Yautja. He knew their pyramids and weapons held technology far beyond humanity's, and he was determined to get his hands on it. In opening one such pyramid, though, he set off the chain of events that unleashed a full-blown xenomorph outbreak across the planet. Carl also showed up in 2013's Aliens Colonial Marines, a game that was hyped to the moon and back but ended up being roasted for its story and gameplay. Fans never really embraced Carl as part of the lore, and for good reason. Colonial Marines is widely considered non-canon and generally feels like a messy, alternate timeline. That puts Carl into the same bucket as fun but questionable additions to the Alien universe. He exists, but he doesn't hold much weight when stacked against the films or even stronger EU material.
Surge detected.
Mother, retract the energy sales and channel.
Marvelous verdict. You know, I thought my family had its fair share of drama, but then I looked into the Weyland-Vickers family tree and suddenly felt a lot better about my own. Because when you really look at the Weyland-Vickers family tree, it's less about heartwarming family dinners and more about money, ego, legacy, and a strange fixation with creating life in ways that probably shouldn't exist. The old man, Peter Weyland, really thought money and tech could cheat death. On the other hand, there's Meredith Vickers, forever stuck trying to prove she deserved Daddy's throne. And then there's a whole line of androids to keep the legacy running long after the humans turn to dust. It's exactly the kind of family drama that feels right at home in the alien universe. We can't help but laugh at how every generation, flesh or synthetic, keeps circling back to the same obsession with control. Whether it's a company, immortality, or the perfect organism, the Weyland-Vickers name is always tied to chasing power. And honestly, watching them unravel might be the only human part of their story. As always, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.